Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome to Balancing Life this Friday, where we're going to be talking about food-related issues, food safety, what things we need to know. Is it safe to eat inside of a restaurant? What about those seeds that arrived in our mailbox? How do we keep ourselves and our families safe from coronavirus issues related to food, but also other, food-borne illnesses that happen and are not fun at all? Joining us today are our expert presenters, Dr. Renee Boyer and Dr. Melissa Chase. I am your host, Crystal Tyler Mackey, welcoming you on behalf of the Virginia Cooperative Extension Human Development Program Team and NC State University. As always, we welcome your thoughts and questions in the chat box, and we'll try to get to those as we can at the end or by email if we aren't able to get to them today. So without further delay, I'm going to turn this over to our speakers, Dr. Boyer and Dr. Chase.
Okay, hello and welcome everyone this morning. So what we're going to talk about today is primarily talking about dealing with food safety at home, in stores, in restaurants, and gardens related to dealing with COVID-19. And so COVID-19 is not really what we consider a foodborne pathogen. However, there's a lot of concern about COVID-19 and its spread, whether that be through food or in these other environments where we purchase and procure our food. So we're going to talk about that today. Next slide. So before we really get into talking about the food side of things, I just wanted to give a quick background about COVID-19 and what we know about the virus. And so I think based on what I'm going to say for this slide, it's going to really translate to the things and the messages that I give in the future slides. So what we know about the virus is that it's transmitted primarily person to person through respiratory droplets that are expelled when we cough, sneeze, talk, those types of things. It is mainly transferred between person to person when there's sustained contact, not so much when it's fleeting contact, but when we talk about sustained contact, we talk about 15 minutes or more within close contact with somebody. So that's why we have the messaging that we need to stay 6 feet apart from individuals. And what we know is that there is limited to no spread through surfaces. And I think this is important to mention because there's a lot of misinformation out there. There is a lot of information that talks about the virus's survival on surfaces, but what we don't know is whether or not that survival on surfaces translates to actual spread to another object. The other thing that we don't know from some of the literature is that while yes, we know that maybe it's still on some of these surfaces, we don't know if it's active live virus, and so that's one of the things that's really important to note. And the most important thing that I can tell anyone for this presentation today is that there is no evidence that supports any transmission of this virus through food. And so that is very, very important. And I know initially when, the shutdown occurred and COVID-19 cases started occurring in the United States, everyone was very concerned about their food and is this transmitted that way? But, we're 4 or 5 months in now, and at this point, there's still no evidence that supports that. And so that's really, really good news for us in terms of talking about food supply and food procurement. Next slide. So as I'm sure everybody that's listening in today knows, COVID-19 has drastically changed our consumer food habits. Prior to COVID-19 pandemic, there were about 52% of meals were eaten outside of the home, and that has decreased significantly. Currently, we know as a result of COVID-19, consumer food sourcing has changed significantly. 72% of people have reduced the frequency of their grocery trips, instead choosing to buy large amounts of items during one specific grocery trip instead of making several throughout the week, or some people are even only making that trip once every few weeks. There's been a dramatically increased incidence of grocery shopping online, whether that be home delivery or pickup, through a variety of sources like Amazon Fresh, Walmart delivery, Instacart, and other groceries. Grocers. I know that I personally have almost exclusively used Kroger ClickList over the course of the last 5 months. And thankfully, many of these retailers have waived the fees associated with these pickup services to make them more accessible to families. There's been a significant increase in bulk purchasing and increased spending at the grocery store because people are eating more at home versus eating out. Um, there's also been a change in people's eating habits. 70% of folks report eating more frequently than they did before. 47% report eating more sweets. 43% report eating more produce. And 39% are eating a more regular breakfast, which I think is probably a good thing in the long run. Next slide, please. The other thing that we've seen, and I mentioned in the previous slide, is there's been a lot more cooking at home. So between 54 and 88% of people are cooking more than they normally do at home, and that discrepancy just depends on the surveys that have been done, the studies that have been done. 46% of people are baking more, 50% are more confident in their cooking skills, 26% are actively learning about cooking at home and taking the time at home to learn about new cooking techniques. 44% have discovered new ingredients, 50% have discovered new brands of foods, and 51% indicate that they will continue to cook more at home even after the pandemic is gone. Next slide. There's also a drastically larger number of folks that are growing their own food. Consumers are more interested in growing their own food because more people are at home looking for hobbies, and that's certainly a great hobby to take up. There's been grocery shortages, so people have been concerned about some of the shortages they've seen at the grocery store. And there's also a desire to be much more self-sufficient. So there's been an increase in vegetable gardens, and the statistics here are kind of hard to find, but what I have found is that there's been a 63% increase in online sales of garden products. We've seen that there have been seed shortages in the spring when people were starting their vegetable gardens. And then there's been also an increase in consumers raising chickens at home for eggs, and there's been a 100% increase in sales of chicks this year over last year. Next slide. So, I talked a little bit about some of the trends that we've seen at home, but there've been a lot of food industry challenges. And one of the things I want to talk about is some of the challenges facing the food industry, the food restaurants, and how they're trying to overcome some of those challenges in order to bring safe food to consumers at home. One of the biggest challenges that they have had with the food industry is outbreaks among workers. And if you remember, I talked about that this virus is spread primarily from person to person. And so most people that work in the food industry in food processing work in close contact. And so, at least initially when the virus broke in the US, there started to be several outbreaks associated with workers in food processing plants. And that resulted in a number of plant closures across the United States, which then resulted in some meat production is down and some shortages due to processing plant shutdowns and labor shortages. And then this in turn resulted in some of these purchasing limitations that we've seen at the grocery store and some of the shortages that we've seen. But on the other side, direct to consumer sales have boomed. And, sort of depending on how you feel about supporting local agriculture, this could be a really great thing. So farmers markets, CSAs, et cetera, have had really a boom in sales. Many local farmers that I've specifically talked to haven't been able to keep up with the demand that they have, specifically related to meat products, I have found. So people are buying more and more of their meat from local producers in their areas. Next slide. So some of the things that the food industry and food manufacturing facilities have done in order to respond to some of these challenges is that they have, obviously had to implement social distancing in their processing plants by installing barriers, changing some of their policies at gathering places like lunch breaks and those types of areas. And then slowing lines in order to allow for there to be less personnel, which then results in less food that's being produced. There's also been, obviously, as we've all seen, an increase in use of PPE related to, using gloves and face coverings. They've been decreasing the number of employees in areas, doing much more stringent and significant disinfection, and more regular disinfection in processing areas for commonly used equipment, and then also implementing illness reporting and screening policies. Next slide. So not only, as I mentioned, has the food industry been challenged, the restaurant industry has also been challenged significantly. And this has been related to the fact that as a result of the food industry challenges, there have been supply chain disruptions. So some restaurants can't get some of the supplies and some of the ingredients that they're used to getting. They've also had to implement seating capacity limits, as we've most all seen. So if restaurants have been able to open in your state or in your locality, there are seating capacity limits. Many restaurants have had to be nimble by creating outdoor spaces, oftentimes where outdoor spaces didn't exist. And they've also had to include a much more training for employees and social distancing of employees and customers inside the restaurants. They're also implementing ways to protect customers from the viral contamination using masks and gloves and using approved disinfectants, again, more frequently and more with some of the more high touch areas, like I mentioned, for the food processing facilities. Next slide. Then also the retail grocery stores have also had to respond to this outbreak as well. And so they've done this by implementing hand sanitizing stations for customers and employees, which I'm sure most of you have seen in the grocery stores if you're actually physically going in to shop for groceries. Many stores are implementing policies where they have employees that are sanitizing shopping carts and other high traffic, high touch areas on a regular basis. They've also instituted purchasing limits on high demand items. I know especially here in Southwest Virginia, there have been purchasing limits on ground beef and other beef products. They've also scheduled specific hours for vulnerable populations to shop, which has been really important. And then, as I have previously mentioned, expanding remote shopping options, whether that's click and collect, delivery, pickup, shop by phone, those types of things. And they've also had to close salad bars, buffets, and other ready-to-eat or sample offerings in stores. And honestly, I'm not sure that this practice will come back in the post-COVID era. Of course, we'll have to just wait and see. Next slide. Okay, so now I'm going to turn it over to Melissa, and she's going to talk a little bit about ways for consumers to safely procure their food.
Thank you, Renee. And before I actually get to the part about limiting exposure to other people, I want to step back for just a moment and think more about what I might do from home as I plan my grocery store trips, because planning is really, really important. And so to get yourself ready, you want to keep a list of the things that you need throughout the week so that you're not trying to scramble at the last minute to figure out what you need at the grocery store, because we're trying to limit the amount of time that we're actually in the grocery store. So go through your pantry, see what you already have, plan your meals around that, have a meal plan ready for the week, and then base your grocery list on that, on the things that you need for those meals. And so then when you get to the grocery store, you can limit the amount of exposure while you're in the store and limit your time in the store, because it can be very anxiety provoking for folks who are trying to get in and out quickly, and they're overwhelmed with trying to get in and social distance and get their groceries. And so, you know, if it weren't during a pandemic, you might be in the grocery store looking and reading labels and looking for new products, but we just don't really have time to do that right now if you're trying to get in and out on a very quick, short notice. And so while you're in the store, you want to make sure that you're limiting your exposure to other people. So you want to make sure you're social distancing while you're in the grocery store. You also want to make sure that when you're going down the aisle, that you are keeping distance from those who may be ahead of you, that may be at the place that you need to be. So you want to wait patiently for that, or maybe come back just a little bit later, move on to the next product, and then come back. You also want to make sure that you consider grocery pickup or delivery to reduce the exposure to other people. So that's going to be the least amount of exposure. And so if that's feasible for you and you live in an area where you have access to that, you might want to consider that. But I will say for the delivery, I know Renee mentioned earlier that a lot of stores are waiving fees for pickup. Also think about possible ways that you may have to pay for delivery. So there may be a delivery charge. So you need to figure that into the budget when you're considering getting groceries through delivery. It's very convenient, but it may cost a little bit more, but it may be worth the convenience. You want to make sure that you're grocery shopping during non-peak hours. And also, as Renee mentioned earlier, a lot of stores are having specific times where populations that would be considered higher risk for contracting COVID can come in and shop specifically. So you want to stay away from those hours if you're not in one of those risk categories. But then maybe you come a little bit later, later morning or evening, but typically during midday are going to be your peak hours that more people are going to be in the store. Make sure that you're wearing your mask or your face covering, and also make sure that your face is fully covered. What I've been seeing quite a bit of is people wearing masks, but they're below their nose. That's not helpful. And so you want to make sure your face is covered properly so that you're protecting yourself as well as those around you. If the stores have wipes available for you to sanitize your cart, you can do so, but if they don't have those, you can bring your own to be able to wipe down your cart. And then make sure when you get home that you wash your hands and sanitize your hands when you get through the door, before you unload the groceries, and then after you unload the groceries. So it's really important. These are things that we should be doing anyway, but we're really emphasizing that right now during this pandemic. And so wash your hands, wash your hands, wash your hands. I can't emphasize that enough. And we've already said shop quickly and just don't handle items more than necessary. Just get it in and out as quickly as you can. Renee mentioned earlier that surfaces have little to no transmission of the virus, and so there's really no reason to quarantine or sanitize your groceries. And there's been a lot of misinformation out there about that, and so it's not necessary for you to do that unless it's something that you want to do on your own, but it's not something that you have to do. There's also no reason to sanitize your fresh fruits and vegetables. This is something we've been talking about for a long time. There are products on the market that promote using detergents that are supposedly safe for produce, or some people use vinegar as a way to, quote, sanitize their vegetables. You don't need to do that. That's not recommended. Simply wash with water, and wash well with water. If you have fruits and vegetables that need to be scrubbed, scrub them, and that ought to be sufficient. If you're having difficulty finding hand sanitizer, which you probably are, depending on where you live, I know we've had some difficulty finding it here also in Southwest Virginia. There are recommendations for you to make your own hand sanitizer, and this is a handout that is available to you from our Extension website. At the end of our presentation, we will have some resources for you to go to for all the information that we've talked about today, and so this particular handout will be available to you as well, so that you have, quote, the recipe to be able to make this. I will say though, if you're using the isopropyl alcohol, some of the chain stores, especially in our area, have been limited in supply for several months. And so something that I have found that works, may work in your community as well. If you have a local pharmacy that's locally owned, you might check there first to see if they have it or if they can order it for you, because we are seeing some shortages on that. So that's something to keep in mind. And especially with the 91% isopropyl alcohol, that can actually be an issue as well. So, but it is possible to make your own hand sanitizer. We just wanted to make you all aware of that. If you're thinking about eating out in restaurants, certainly takeout and delivery is still the safest option. So when you're thinking about levels of risk, when you're out and about and you're thinking about going to a restaurant, if you're seeing that cases are rising in your area, and we have seen parts of our state recently increasing significantly with the number of cases, that may dictate whether you want to go out or not. But you can keep track of that on the Department of Health's website. They have specific sites dedicated to keeping track of them on a daily basis in every state, probably most every state. So you can keep track of that. If you're planning to go to a restaurant, you might want to sit outside over sitting inside. You're going to increase your risk by a little bit, but sitting outside would be probably a little safer than inside. And then for restaurants that are open right now, they are supposed to be providing social distancing for you. And so you want to make sure that's actually occurring. Make sure you wear your mask when you're not eating. So when you're coming in, when you're leaving, when you're having conversation and not eating, make sure that you're wearing your mask properly. and then follow any additional guidelines from the particular restaurant if they have signage that they have up regarding how you social distance or where you stand to wait in line or however they're going to seat you. Make sure that you're aware of that and that you follow those particular guidelines. Next, we would just want to concentrate a little bit on preserving foods. We've mentioned several times already this morning, we've seen a significant increase in interest in people growing and preserving their own food. And so we have a lot of resources within Extension and cooperative extension at the national level to help you safely produce and also preserve your food. And probably the ones that we see the most of as far as questions are canning and freezing. We're starting to see an increase in people wanting to ferment foods and dry them, but most of our questions come from canning and freezing. So we'll concentrate a little bit on where do you go from here if you're interested in preserving your food, you need to brush up on how to do it, or you may be new to it. We have specific resources that we send people to get the information that they need to safely preserve their product. The three that you see here with the National Center for Home Food Preservation is a USDA center that is actually through the University of Georgia, and the So Easy to Preserve series is also through the University of Georgia. And so they're our premier go-to for anything related to any type of food preservation. They have lots of recipes on there. All of them are tested for safety. We want to make sure that we're using those science-based resources. They also have information on how to use a canner, a pressure canner versus a hot water bath canner, and in which instances you would want to use one versus the other. They also have lots of information that will be helpful to you as you try to navigate through where to go next, including the Ball Blue Book. Is also something that you can get locally and easily in most any grocery store or feed and seed store. There are all kinds of different department stores. I'm not sure what the availability is right now because we're in the middle of the canning season and freezing and so forth. So they may be a little more challenging to find, but you want to make sure that you're using those resources. I will tell you some of my favorite recipes from the National Center for Home Food Preservation are zucchini flavored pineapple, pineapple flavored zucchini. So when you tend to grow zucchini and yellow squash, they proliferate quite a bit, and people are always looking for recipes for that. And so they have some excellent recipes on their site, including a yellow squash relish recipe and that pineapple flavored zucchini that you could use in any recipe just like you would pineapple, and it's really delicious. And so you can have a lot of fun with those particular recipes. But before you get started canning, and if that's something that you're planning on doing to preserve your food, if you have a canner that is a dial gauge canner, so if we're talking about canning vegetables, we're either going to be using a hot water bath canner for high acid foods, that would be your fruits, or you're going to be using a pressure canner to can those foods that would be considered low acid foods, including like your meats, your fish, and certainly your vegetables. And out of those canners, there are going to be two different types. They're going to be dial gauge canners, and they're going to be weighted gauge canners. If you have a weighted gauge canner, you don't have to have it inspected as far as the weighted gauge. It's not necessary, but there may be other parts of the canner you'd like to have looked at to see if maybe those parts need to be replaced. But if you have a dial gauge canner, what we recommend is that you come to your local extension office each year at the beginning of canning season. You can still get it done now, but certainly think ahead, and they can test that dial gauge for you. Now, one thing you need to keep in mind is if you have an older canner, buyer beware, because what we're seeing a lot of right now is for folks who are either having difficulty finding canners. You might have one that a family member says, you can use my canner, but it's about 30, 40, or 50 years old. You may have difficulty finding parts on that, and it may be a canner that we cannot test in our local extension offices depending on the particular brand. If you have a dial gauge canner, we have our master tester units that are available in our local offices that provide that service. You need to call and find out if they're actually providing that service. But for the ones that are providing it, for dial gauges, we have a Presto master gauge unit. And the brands that they are able to work with are Presto, Magic Seal, Maid of Honor, and National. And that information is actually located on the National Center for Home Food Preservation. And so You don't have to worry about writing that down. They do actually have that information there for you. But if you need to have your dial gauge tested and it's one of those brands, and if for some reason that the local extension office cannot test it for you, you can send it to National Presto Industries. Go to their website, find out how to get it to them, or contact them and let them know that you need to have your dial gauge tested, and they can make recommendations for whether they think it needs to be replaced or not. But just keep in mind, it does take a little bit of time for you to mail it to them and then mail it back to you. And so those are some things to keep in mind when you're using those canners. Okay, Renee, I'll hand it back to you to talk about the wonderful course that we have available for home food preservation.
Okay, great. Thanks so much, Melissa. So just to give you all a quick plug about our virtual home food preservation course that we're offering. This is a completely online course that you do at your own pace. And it's going to cover the science behind home food preservation, boiling water bath canning, pressure canning, freezing, dehydration, fermentation, and then in the near future, we're going to also include a unit on kombucha. And so there's a $15 course fee. You can register at the link that we've provided in the slides. But this is the type of course that you would register for, enroll, and you can do it, the modules, as many times as you want, and repeat the content as many times as you want, and take it completely at your own pace between now and the end of the year. It'll be available and accessible to you. And if anybody has any questions, I would encourage you just to contact me, and I can answer some of the questions. We've had a team of extension agents in Virginia, along with myself and Melissa, that have worked really hard to try and provide this type of home food preservation content for you all, so that we didn't have to worry about any close physical contact with others. So please let me know if you have any interest in that. Next slide. Okay, so finally, what's the deal with those seeds? Everyone has seen, probably on social media and in local news outlets, folks are talking about these seeds that some individuals are receiving in their mail that come from China. And so honestly, at this point, nobody really knows what the deal is with the seeds. However, there is concern that if folks receive those seeds and then plant them, they could be an invasive species that could take over and could cause some issues. There could be some other concerns with the seeds as well. This is just the predominant one that I think that the USDA is concerned about. So if any of you receive these seeds in the mail, contact your state Department of Ag or your state plant health director and follow these steps. They want everyone to save the seeds and the packaging that they came in, including the mailing label, because they're trying to track it. Do not open the seeds. Do not plant the seeds. If you've already opened them, place all the materials, the seeds, the packaging, the labeling, everything into a Ziploc bag and seal it. And then also, if you have planted them, leave them in the ground until you receive any further instruction from the Department of Agriculture. So these are really the suggestions for folks to follow if you receive any of these seeds in the mail. Next slide. All right, so with that, we'd be glad to answer any of your questions. I think that I was answering some questions in the chat box while Melissa was talking, and I may have missed one or two. So if that's the case, please let me know, and I can talk some more about that. I would just like to direct everybody to the Virginia Tech Department of Food Science and Technology website, the Virginia Cooperative Extension website, and that's where we have all of our COVID-19 resources. And I honestly, I think there's about 100 of them. I don't know, I haven't counted, but there's a lot. And then also the North Carolina Cooperative Extension COVID-19 resources, and those are the same. They've been developed in collaboration between us and Ben Chapman at NC State. So they're all the same. They're just branded for the specific states. So with that, I'd be glad to answer any questions.
Well, I'd just like to say thank you, because we have an assembly line that we go through, whether we order the food or we go to the grocery store ourselves and get it, that involves the assembly line of unpacking. I wash it off in the sink, with Dawn, and you know, the chicken packages, anything that can be washed, we wash it all with the Dawn before we put it in the refrigerator. Even the water bottles, we're washing them off because, you know, we're thinking, you know, who's handled this last? We need to wash this off real good. So that kind of eases the tension on that end of that, just having to wash everything.
Yeah, and Herman, I'll tell you, you know, over the last 5 months, you know, since the pandemic started, I've been in contact with, you know, all of my colleagues across the United States that are food microbiologists and extension microbiologists, and I'll tell you that initially we were really concerned about that, but that none of us follow any of those procedures. Although I understand why you would. So hopefully that's eased your mind a little bit, so
Yeah.
that you can maybe save a little bit more time.
Yes, indeed. There was one other thing that I saw that was talking about pesticides on vegetables if you don't buy organic food.
Mm-hmm.
And there was one suggestion, you can tell me if this is okay or not. They say, you know, maybe put baking soda in the water and wash, and then put vinegar, you know, rinse them, and then rinse them in water with vinegar in it to get the pesticides off. Is that a safe practice?
I'll tell you, I don't know about that in specific relation to pesticides. In my area, we talk a lot more about the bacteria and the things that make us sick, you know, acutely, if we consume the food. And there's been a lot of research that's been done to try and find the best way to remove pathogens and those types of things from fresh fruits and vegetables, and nothing is better than water. So if I know that doesn't exactly answer your question, but I'll tell you that there's been a lot of research on specifically with the foodborne pathogens. So really the recommendation is just rinse with water, and that's all you need to do.
Okay, thank you.
Renee, we're coming to a close, but there's a couple more that I'm just going to toss out there to either you or Melissa to answer quickly. I'm going to tell them to you at the same time. One is, you know, people are coming home, taking off their clothes, throwing them in the washer. Is that necessary? A second question was about freezer items.
What about freezer items?
So are we concerned about the virus living on freezer items? Does coronavirus get preserved in frozen or freezer items?
Yeah, so the first question related to taking off your clothes, I would say that's definitely overkill. Don't spend any time being concerned about that. This virus, remember, it's really transmitted from breathing in the particulates in the air around you, and the respiratory droplets. So it's really not that. There's not a lot of evidence that shows that it's transmitted via surfaces. So I think that that's probably not something that you would need to do. And then also, in addition to the freezer question, again, same answer in terms of, you know, we're really not concerned about the virus surviving on any surfaces for extended periods of time, certainly not in the freezer. And so that is not something that you need to be concerned about either.
Right. Thank you so much. This has been so informative and so helpful. I've seen a lot of posts in the chat, especially I think one of the big takeaways is you don't have to spend that time washing your groceries, which is so arduous. It's hard, it's messy, it's not fun. It makes it like, yeah, we got these groceries, but now there's a whole other job to do before you can put them away. So that's a big deal.
And honestly, I'll tell you, in the very beginning, back in March, I did that at least once or twice. And I was like, no, we don't need to do that.
Yeah, it's freeing. I got that information, I think, from you all a while back. And so my household has been so relieved to not have to do that again. But thanks so much, Doctors Boyer and Chase, for bringing this useful information to us. There's been a request for the slides. We're happy to share that out with the recording link. And as always, you can find any of the previous recordings from Balance in Life on our Virginia Cooperative Extension website. To all who've been here, thank you for joining us today. We'd love to get your feedback. There's a survey link, and we'll send that out and send everything as soon as the recording is available. So I appreciate all of you. Eat well this weekend, eat safely this weekend, and enjoy your time. Thanks all.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Thanks, Crystal.
Thank you.